I smoothed my silk blouse for the third time, the fabric cool against my fingertips, and took a slow breath. The party was in full swing, soft jazz drifting from the speakers, the clink of glasses, the low hum of conversation weaving around the sparkling chandeliers. From the corner of my eye, I caught her, Mom, leaning against the doorway, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and the unmistakable glint of judgment in her stare. I felt that familiar lump in my throat, the one that had haunted me since childhood whenever her words cut too deep. Not enough. Always not enough. But tonight, I wasn't the nervous girl she used to dismiss. Tonight, I held my head high, a quiet fire burning behind my calm exterior. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a sharp vibration that pulled me back to the present. I peeked at the screen, just another message congratulating me on my latest milestone. I smiled, the weight of secrecy pressing lightly against me. They all thought I was struggling, playing it small, just for appearances. They had no idea how far I'd come, how much I had endured, and how much power I now carried in silence. Her gaze met mine for a fraction of a second, sharp and knowing. I could almost hear the words she hadn't spoken yet. I straightened my shoulders, letting a calm, confident smile take over. Inside, though, a whirlwind of emotion churned. Hurt, pride, irony. She thought she could intimidate me. She had no idea. Tonight, I was ready to confront more than just her words. Tonight, I was ready to show the woman I had become. I remember that night vividly, the way the dim light of the living room cast shadows across the walls, making everything feel heavier than it should have. I had just returned from my first attempt at presenting my work at a small gallery, my portfolio clutched tightly to my chest, trembling fingers betraying my excitement. I had imagined her pride, her soft words, maybe even a hint of encouragement. Instead, I got the cold edge of her judgment. "You're wasting your time with this nonsense," she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the air like glass. "When will you focus on something that actually matters?" My chest tightened. I felt my hands shake, as if they were betraying my inner fire. The lump in my throat grew larger, threatening to spill over in tears I refused to shed. I'm trying, Mom," I whispered, my voice barely audible, swallowed by the weight of disappointment in her gaze. It wasn't just her words, it was the entire atmosphere, the quiet dismissal, the way my father avoided eye contact, pretending to be absorbed in the television. In that moment, I realized I couldn't count on them to validate my dreams. I was on my own. That's when Grandma's words floated back to me, something she had told me on one of her rare visits. The world doesn't hand you respect. You earn it, even if the ones you love fail to see it. She had pressed a small, worn charm into my palm, a silver locket with a delicate engraving of a phoenix. "Keep this close. When they doubt you, remember who you are capable of becoming." I clutched that locket in the following weeks, letting it ground me through sleepless nights filled with self-doubt and uncertainty. I started making small, brave choices, applying for opportunities one wasn't sure I was ready for, staying up late to perfect my work, proving to myself that I could survive outside their approval. The sting of rejection, the echo of harsh words, and the cold dismissal became fuel. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would rise, not for them, but for me. I would build a life they couldn't ignore, a life they couldn't belittle. And I would do it quietly, patiently, until the day came when my success would speak louder than their criticisms ever could. After that pivotal night, I threw myself into building a life that reflected my worth, quietly, deliberately, and with a fierce determination that surprised even me. I found a small studio apartment downtown, the kind with creaky floors and sunlight that spilled through tall windows in the morning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and that alone felt revolutionary. I spent hours there, sketching, designing, pitching my ideas to anyone who would listen, absorbing every bit of feedback like a sponge. Then I met Clara, a seasoned art curator who had an eye for talent but also a rare patience for those just finding their footing. She became my mentor, guiding me through the murky waters of exhibitions, contracts, and negotiations. She challenged me relentlessly, but always with a belief I hadn't realized I'd been craving. "You're capable of more than you think," she would say, often when I doubted myself most. The early days were grueling. There were nights I cried over failed pitches and weeks when I wondered if I had miscalculated everything. I had no safety net, no one to fall back on. I had to learn fast, how to handle rejection without letting it define me, how to assert my value without arrogance, and how to balance patience with persistence. Each small success became a lifeline. My first client, a modest commission, felt like winning the lottery. The first profitable sale, though small, carried the thrill of independence. And with each achievement, I tucked a little away, careful not to let my family know. I built my reputation quietly, attending gallery shows, connecting with influential people in my field, and even venturing into online platforms where my work could reach wider audiences. With each step, I grew, not just financially but emotionally, intellectually, and creatively. I became strategic, learning the language of contracts and negotiations, mastering the digital platforms that expanded my reach, and slowly but surely, gaining control over my future. Throughout it all, I wore a mask whenever I spoke to my family, presenting a curated image of modest progress. They thought I was still struggling, that I was settling for what little I could manage. The irony wasn't lost on me. They didn't see the client meetings that ended with applause, the emails confirming exhibitions, or the steady rise of my savings account. They didn't know the nights I stayed awake, planning every move that would one day bring me face with them. Not as the dismissed daughter, but as the woman who had quietly claimed her power. The locket from Grandma never left my side. It was a reminder of the promise I had made, to rise, to endure, and to shine. And as the years passed, I realized that my success wasn't just measured in numbers or accolades. It was measured in freedom, resilience, and the quiet thrill of outgrowing the people who once tried to diminish me. The night of the family gathering arrived, and I felt a calm determination as I stepped out of my car. The driveway was lined with familiar faces, all buzzing with expectation. I knew exactly what they expected to see, the timid, struggling daughter who had always fallen short in their eyes. But tonight I wasn't that girl. Tonight, I carried years of hard-won victories in every confident step I took. The house looked the same, yet everything about me had changed. I slipped inside, my heels clicking softly against the polished floors, and met her gaze immediately. Mom, poised and expectant, yet already bracing for disappointment. I let the moment linger. Let them take in the woman before them. I was composed, elegant, and radiating a quiet power that demanded attention without a word. I led them into the living room, where the subtle glow of modern art reflected off sleek surfaces. The space was unmistakably mine. Expensive prints lined the walls, each telling a story of late nights, relentless effort, and triumph over doubt. A carefully curated display of my achievements, a framed article featuring my work, a gleaming award from a prestigious exhibition, and a table stacked with my published pieces, spoke louder than any introduction I could have made. They hesitated, unsure where to look first. The tension was delicious, a slow burn of anticipation. I smiled, soft but assured, and finally spoke. "You all thought I was struggling, didn't you?" My voice was calm, deliberate. That I'd be lost, relying on others, unsure of my path. They nodded, some shifting uncomfortably, the realization dawning. "Well, let me tell you something. I've been working. I've been building. I've been rising in silence while everyone assumed I was failing." I let a brief pause hang in the air before dropping the reveal. I own my own company now. I've secured multiple exhibitions nationwide, and my work has been featured in top galleries across the country. I'm financially independent, and I make decisions that shape not only my career, but the lives of those I employ. I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. Their reactions were immediate and visceral. Mom's mouth fell open, her usual composure faltering as shock and disbelief painted her face. My father's brows knitted in guilt and awe, while my siblings looked from me to each other, their whispers revealing the same stunned realization. They had underestimated me completely. I watched them struggle to reconcile the woman before them with the version they had always dismissed. And I smiled inwardly, remembering every late night, every tear, every ounce of courage it had taken to reach this point. They had seen only what I allowed them to see, but now, the truth was undeniable. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from their judgment, but from the weight of needing their approval. The power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't just their daughter. I was a woman who had proven that resilience, vision, and determination could rewrite the narrative they thought they controlled. And as I watched them process the revelation, I realized that the moment wasn't just about shocking them. It was about reclaiming my story, asserting my worth, and finally making them see me, not as the girl they doubted, but as the woman I had become. The room was heavy with tension, the silence thick, as they absorbed every word I had just spoken. But I wasn't finished. I wasn't there merely to shock them. I was there to set the terms, to reclaim control over my life and the energy they had once drained from me. I took a slow breath, letting my gaze sweep over each of them, letting them feel the full weight of my presence. "I'm willing to help," I said, my voice calm, firm, yet threaded with care. "But not on your terms. On mine. And only if you're willing to change as well." Mom's lips pressed together, suspicion flickering in her eyes. "Change?" she asked cautiously. "Yes," I replied. "Change. Stop undermining, stop belittling, and stop living in a cycle of judgment. You cannot support me while holding on to the same patterns that hurt me. If you want to be part of my life in the future, there are conditions." I outlined them clearly, my tone deliberate. Accountability. Every decision you make should reflect your true intentions, not just old expectations. Admit mistakes, own them, and learn. Pursuit of personal growth. Each of you must actively seek something meaningful for yourselves, passions, careers, or goals that you care about deeply. I will support you, but I will not carry you. Respect and communication. Words have weight. No more dismissals, criticisms, or undermining. Speak honestly, kindly, and without judgment. Release toxic patterns. Let go of past resentments, comparisons, and the old narratives that have trapped us all. If you refuse, you remain outside my life, and I move forward without you. I paused, letting the conditions sink in. Their faces were a mix of shock, hesitation, and dawning realization. I could see the wheels turning, the mental resistance giving way to the possibility of change. "I'm not asking for perfection," I added softly. "I'm asking for effort, for growth, for the willingness to meet me in a space of mutual respect. This isn't about revenge. It's about healing for all of us." Mom's eyes glistened, a tear threatening to escape. My father exhaled slowly, a mixture of shame and relief washing over his features. Even my siblings nodded, tentative but sincere, understanding that the old ways would no longer serve us. For the first time, I felt the balance shift completely. I wasn't just the daughter who had endured. They had become the ones being asked to step up. And in that power, there was no arrogance, only clarity. I had carved boundaries and demanded respect, not out of spite, but out of love for myself and the future. I refused to compromise. This was the moment when the past collided with the present, and I held the steering wheel. I was no longer reacting to their expectations or criticisms. I was leading, defining the terms of engagement, and shaping the family dynamics on my own terms. For the first time in my life, I realized I had the power to choose who stayed in my life, and on what terms. And they had no choice but to acknowledge it. Weeks passed after that party, and I began to notice subtle but meaningful changes. Mom no longer made offhand, critical remarks. Instead, she asked questions about my work, genuinely curious and supportive. My father joined in, sharing small achievements of his own that he had quietly pursued. Even my siblings began exploring passions they had abandoned, inspired in part by the standards I had set. The transformation wasn't instant, and it wasn't perfect. There were missteps, awkward moments, and reminders of the old patterns. But each effort, each attempt, each honest conversation strengthened the bonds we had once thought irreparable. It was as if the energy I had invested in myself now radiated outward, creating a ripple effect that encouraged growth and healing. I often found myself touching the silver locket from Grandma, the same one I had held through the darkest nights of my journey. It was more than a charm. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that the path to power and respect always starts with oneself. Every glance at it reminded me how far I had come, and how the woman I had become could not be diminished by anyone, not even family. In quiet moments, I reflected on the journey, the sting of rejection, the countless hours of hard work, the fear that once held me back. I realized that all of it had been necessary to sculpt the woman standing before them now. I had learned that independence was not just financial, it was emotional, spiritual, and personal. It was the freedom to define my worth on my own terms. The party, the confrontation, the conditions, they had all been part of a larger story, one of empowerment and reclamation. And now, as I watched those I loved grow alongside me, I felt a deep sense of closure. Not because they had finally acknowledged me, but because I had acknowledged myself first, and that made all the difference. I smiled, glancing once more at the locket resting against my chest. The fire within me burned brighter than ever, a gentle, unwavering flame of confidence and grace. I knew my life was mine to lead, my successes mine to claim, and my happiness mine to protect. And as I looked around at the people who once doubted me, I realized that the real victory wasn't proving them wrong. It was proving to myself that I had always been enough. I am Claire Montgomery.